The Mariners dropped 2 of 3 to the Milwaukee Brewers in Milwaukee. We're going to go over what went wrong in this series, and then we're going to look ahead to the Toronto Blue Jays series and what the Mariners need to do to get back on track. We're also then going to talk about one key for the Mariners to have a more successful end to this road trip and what we need to see when the Mariners get back home. Thank you guys so much for watching episode 76 of the Hit It Here podcast, part of the Bleav Network, the Jose Caballero episode of the podcast, and I am here with Joseph. Joseph, how are you?
We're government naming me today.
Mm.
I'm okay. I, to be quite frank with you, didn't watch a single pitch from the final game of the Brewers series. I got home from work, saw that it was 6-2, and decided to choose mental health today, of all days. You know what I mean? Really, really didn't want to put myself through it, and it wasn't. It wasn't a great game. It wasn't a great end to the series. And we knew, I think, kind of going in to this Brewers series that one, the Brewers are kind of playing hot, but also the final game with Emerson Hancock on the mound was your biggest question mark. We kind of could all pinpoint that, like, okay, this is going to be, it could go south, and it did. And that is Colton's reaction to the Rangers getting a hit off of Ronel Blanco for the first time this year. If you guys were crazy enough to maybe double down on the no-hit bet for Ronel Blanco, you probably placed it on Bet Online. You failed on this one, but quickly, a word from Bet Online. The NCAA tournament comes to a close tonight. March Madness reaches its culmination with Purdue taking on UConn. Will Zach Edey be able to right his wrongs from the past tournaments, or will UConn continue to be one of the greatest programs college basketball has ever seen? This entire bracket season, BetOnline has been your bracket headquarters. They're almost, it's almost done. So once March Madness is finished, have no fear. BetOnline has you covered with plenty of other sports to bet on around the major leagues here, like NHL playoffs are right around the corner, and the NBA playoffs also right around the corner. And as you guys know, as fans of Mariner Mojo, MLB is in full swing here. Second week basically getting under wraps here. There's plenty to do, plenty to bet on Bet Online. They're your number one source for all your summer sports wagering. And when you head to Bet Online, you're going to stay up to date with all the action. And remember to use promo code Bleav, that's BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online, the game starts here. We all know that the first game of the Brewers series was a pretty gut-punching, heart-wrenching loss, you'd say. We battled back. It was tough because Logan Gilbert gave up a couple solo shots, wasn't his sharpest. Freddie Peralta was dicing up the Mariners, but eventually they got to him, and they showed a little bit of, I think, resilience on offense. But as we know, the game ended with a walk-off walk, courtesy of Andres Munoz. Not a stellar outing from him. Colton, anything specifically you want to hit on from game one of that series?
That's a game where I wasn't bad. I wasn't mad about that game. Yes, it was ugly to watch Andres Munoz basically walk in a run for the Brewers to win the game. But overall, the Mariners' offense showed that it can battle back. That it was I think a big game for their, I guess, their headspace this season, because it's after what we saw in the George Kirby start back home against the Guardians. Who knew what this offense was going to look like going into Milwaukee facing Freddie Peralta? Freddie Peralta is a damn good pitcher. No two ways around that. I'm not mad about however many times the Mariners struck out against him. I don't care. It's Freddie Peralta. The Mariners went in there and they put up good at-bats, and unfortunately they were not working his pitch count as much as I wanted them to. That was the one thing that we talked about going into the series. You need to focus on working his pitch count. They didn't do that. But they did get to Freddie Peralta there towards the end of his outing, and against Abner Uribe, the Mariners were able to string some hits together and tie the game. Andres Munoz, freak outing from him. We saw it the next day. He was fine. Freak outing from him. We'll probably never see that again in his career. 4 walks in an inning to lose a game. Knock on wood.
Yeah, hopefully.
So overall, game one, I'm not upset about it. Like, it's baseball. Sometimes stuff happens, and that's just the way it goes sometimes. Andres Munoz didn't have it. You go on to the next one. He was able to get the save the next day.
Speaking of that second game, the one win in this series for the Mariners, a game where, there's a little bit of bullpen drama in both of the first two games here. Understandably so, I would say. People, being concerned about certain decision makings. I get it. However, a win is a win. And the Mariners took game 2 5-3 against the Brewers. 7 innings of shutout ball on 78 pitches, no less, for the Mariners starter Bryce Miller. the best starter through the second turn of this rotation, without a doubt in my mind. 7 innings, 3 hits, 1 walk, 7 Ks. His best start of his career. Only the third time he's ever gone 7 in his entire career, and this is by far, I think, his most dominant start. 78 pitches. People wanted him out there for the 8th. You said it on stream when you streamed after the win that you probably have him go out there, and the moment there's a little hint of trouble, you get him out of there. I fall into that same category. I would have probably had him go out there for the 8th. Not even the first hint of trouble. The first person that gets on base, he's gone. Could be a bunt single that Josh Rojas or whoever's playing third base at that point. I can't remember if it was Urias. It was probably Urias because DL Hall was playing, or he was pitching. He started that game for the Brewers. Could have been just the most weak hit of all time. The moment there's a run on base, okay, Bryce Miller's gone. Just because, you never really saw him get to that point as far as an outing. And of course, right on cue, the Mariners bullpen starts to do some shenanigans, and Mariners fandom loses their minds over some bullpen decisions where, you tweeted it out basically saying, I understand pulling Miller. You're I completely understand why that decision was made. The bullpen didn't get the job done in that eighth inning. Austin Voth comes in, 2 hits, 3 earned, 1 walk. Gabe Spire, out of just nowhere, 2 walks as well. Only got an out. They used 3 relievers to get 3 outs in that 8th inning. Voth, Spire, and Thornton. And like you said, Munoz does come in and close it out in the 9th. Looked a lot better. Command was better. He was using his fastball more as opposed to trying to lock in with the slider, I felt like, in that save opportunity. I talked about the pitching. Colton, would you like to lay us down what went right for the offense, putting up 5 runs in that game? No? Cool. So, Mitch Haniger had 2 hits. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, we saw some guys come out and smash some home runs, like Jorge Polanco, his first with the Mariners, and Luis Urias, his first with the Mariners as well. Mitch Haniger had a couple of hits. Julio looked good in this game as well. So the offense as a whole, I think, looked really good in this game, in game 2 against the Brewers, like they should have. They were playing, like you said, facing DL Hall, lefty on the mound, so the Mariners got their right-handed heavy lineup in there. And I think that it was a chance to see how this Mariners offense looked against a lefty not named Logan Allen, because apparently they can't hit Logan Allen to save their lives. Yeah. But the offense, the first 2 games, great signs, in my opinion. First 2 games were a great sign for what we have been waiting to see with this Mariners offense. You talked a little bit about the pitching with Gabe Spire. Apparently he woke up with neck discomfort that day, and he tried to work through it, but once he was full intensity on the mound, then he started to feel it a little bit more and just couldn't finish his pitches. So, whatever. Again, it happens. The bullpen is an issue right now. There's no doubt about it. The bullpen is an issue right now, but we can talk about that a little bit later as we go here into game 3. Emerson Hancock on the mound against Colin Ray. Joe, this just didn't go right from the start.
Yeah, I really don't feel like talking about this game that much. 12 runs by the Brewers, only 4 to the Mariners side here. Emerson Hancock, 3 1/3, 11 hits, 8 earned runs. Struck out 6. Cool. But, yeah, William Contreras just decided that he's the best hitter on the planet during this series. Bro could not stop hitting, exit velos over 105. Dude was on fire, still is on fire. He's a great hitter. No, give him his flowers, but he seemed like he turned up a whole nother level in this series against the Mariners. For us offensively today, Polanco had a good RBI single. Dom Canzone had a garbage time home run. Aside from that, erase this from your memory. Realistically, from the pitching side, unless your name is Taylor Saucedo, had a great 2 2/3, struck out 4. Good for him to kind of come in and be a stopper for the Mariners that were bleeding out at that point. But yeah, I don't know. Not what you want to see finishing out a series, coming out like a limping dog.
Yeah, you mentioned that Emerson Hancock was not good, and we'll talk a little bit later on in the podcast about what the Mariners might want to do about that 5th starter spot. But really quick, touching on, I guess, the series as a whole, because, like you said, game 3, whatever, flush it. It happened, Unfortunately, we've already seen a position player pitch twice for the Mariners. Josh Rojas is going to get his innings in. Mm-hmm. All right, it's going to happen. He has more innings pitched on the year than Matt Brash.
That's my guy.
That's my guy. That's your guy.
That's my guy.
Anyway, I think that, yes, the Mariners lost this series, and I'm not going to try to tell you how to fan. Maybe I am. But this series was an improvement. I know it's hard to look at a series where the Seattle Mariners lost 2 of 3. They lost the series, and they lost, 14-4 or whatever it was, 12-4 in the last game. And they got walked off the first game. It's hard to look at a series and say this is an improvement, but what we saw out of this offense basically in the first 2 games was reassuring. In the last game of the series, Dominic Canzone had the 2 hardest hit balls of the day. Like, Josh Rojas continues to hit. Like, these are all good things. Mitch Haniger got his first day off. Cal had the day off in the last game as well. Dylan Moore continues to hit. Like, we have seen good things out of this offense. It is just about getting the guys like Jorge Polanco, who looks like he's starting to get it going. Now, Julio and JP. Julio hasn't looked terrible, but hasn't looked great. JP just has not looked good. Plain and simple, JP and Cal Raleigh have not looked good yet. It sounds like we will get Ty France back for the Toronto series, but overall, again, I look at this series, and yes, it's a loss, and in the win column, it's not pretty, but overall, I think that this game, or this series, I look at it mainly in a positive light. There are definitely negatives, but I look at this series in a positive light compared to the first 2. Moving on now to the Blue Jays series, Joe. Let's talk a little bit about the pitching matchups we're going to see.
So game 1 is the opening day starters. Luis Castillo versus Jose Barrios, and Barrios looked good in his opening day start. Castillo, we know, hasn't looked exceptional this year. Hopefully he's able to, I guess, get some of the maybe wild card 1 juju back in his blood and really go in and throw 7 shutty against a pretty like mid Toronto Blue Jays offense so far this year. Like, not to say that the Mariners, I have any room to talk as a Mariners fan right now, but currently ranked 18th in WRC plus at 91 is the Toronto Blue Jays. The Mariners are currently 27th at 78, so let's not talk about it. But we can say that the Blue Jays offense is underperforming. So hopefully a Mariners team that needs their pitching to bounce back can do that against this Blue Jays team. Getting to Barrios, they got to Freddie Peralta. I have faith that they can do that against Barrios as well. Game 2 is George Kirby versus Chris Bassett. And Bassett had a great year for the Blue Jays last year, just a dog, a workhorse for them. Grinding out innings, grinding out just good start after good start. But that's also George Kirby. I think they're pretty similar pitchers, and maybe not where they're at in their points of career, but kind of what they bring to the table as far as what you're looking for in a starting pitcher. And if I think I know anything about George Kirby, this start is going to be massive for him in the sense that he will need it to go right. Like, if it goes wrong, I think it'll be the first time we really see 2 like bad starts in a row for George Kirby, if that makes sense. Like 2 like big ones that are like, what is going on? Like, something's wrong. He will be Furious George, as people will like to, give him that moniker. And if I think that he's got it in him, and I think I do, he's gonna go out there and try and mow down that Blue Jays lineup to the best of his ability. And then finally in game 3, Logan Gilbert versus an old friend, Yusei Kikuchi, in game 3 there. I said this in most series so far this year. I'm giving the pitching advantage to the Mariners. Of course, that's backfired a pretty fair amount this year. But Colton, do you have anything that really like stands out to you out of those 3 matchups?
No, I mean, I agree with you. The pitching matchup, again, we said this earlier in the year, it will pretty much always go to the Mariners, especially once Brian Wu is back. Jose Barrios, what I want to see specifically out of the Mariners offense is I want to see them start working counts more. I don't want these guys to get deep. We know that the Blue Jays bullpen is banged up. I don't think they have Eric Swanson back yet, right? They don't have Jordan Romano. So it's like, if you're able to get deep into this bullpen by like the 6th inning, I think you're going to have a really good chance to win this game or this series. Luis Castillo has to come out, and he needs to be big for the Mariners. He needs to be the ace that the Mariners are paying for, because his first 2 starts have not been pretty. I agree with you. George is going to have just a shutdown comeback start because it's George. It's what he does. Like, I think that he's going to come out. He's going to be a little peeved about what happened in that Guardian series, and he's going to take it out on the Blue Jays, and I'm fine with that. And then Logan is going to continue his Cy Young train, because he will be the Cy Young this year. This series specifically for the offense, we need, again, like I said about the Brewers series, you got to see JP get going. This is a good time for Cal to get going because it's against the Blue Jays.
True.
Cal will probably not play the last game of this series. Yeah, he'll probably get the day off. Again, it's against a lefty and Yusei Kikuchi. We know about Yusei's control issues. So I think that's a game where the Mariners could probably get him out early and get to that bullpen. So we'll probably see the right-handed heavy lineup in that last game of the series. But as of right now, I feel like you have to keep guys like Rojas and Dylan Moore in the lineup because they're the ones performing right now.
Especially like looking ahead to that final game against Kikuchi. Like if Dylan Moore gets a day off against either Breos or Bassett, like I'm not going to be mad. I won't be like super upset because you want Rayleigh and Canzone to also get it going. But Dylan Moore, like he's definitely earned his spot in in the pecking order. Like dude is playing very well. I agree with you. Obviously, my guy, Josh Rojas. Urias also, he's stinging some extra base hits as well. So those platoons that are not, I guess, savvy, things that, Mariners fans like to look at, they're not overly terrible right now offensively. It is like, I'd say the main stars of like JP and Julio that really haven't started putting it fully together yet, which is, you said it in the last podcast. This offense will only go as far as like the top 4 in the order. And I think Haniger, if he's in the 4 spot, or Garver's in the 4 spot, they've been okay. We're missing like the raw power output. Canzone's the team leader in home runs with 2, with a measly 2. Team's only hit like 7 home runs on the year so far. So it's just if you can go into the Rogers Center, hit some bombs, get to that Blue Jays starting pitching early, it'll be great. You mentioned JP. Last year, 6 games and 22 at bats, only a $136 against Toronto. So not super favorable there. Of course, that is last year, and
hit me with the Cal Raleigh numbers, baby.
Oh, I mean, I said it the other day, but he's got a 1 OPS against Toronto last year. So, like you're saying, Cal will probably get the day off in the 3rd game against a lefty, but those first 2 against Breos and Bassett, Cal should aim to do some damage because that's what he did all of last year against Toronto. I know he got to Gausman. We miss Gausman even though he had an awful start against New York. 1 1/3, gave up 5 earned or something crazy. But yeah, Cal last year against Toronto, like I said, a 1.587 OPS. Need him to get going, get that offense moving in the second half of the order. I think it'll be important that Cal, not say that he's kind of like the bridge from the top half to the bottom half, as a switch hitter too. It's kind of nice, but keep it going for the offense behind you, who the role players down there have been playing pretty well. And you're also saying we'll get Ty France back. Ty's looked great at the plate all year. If he's a little slow to maybe get back into the swing of things, I wouldn't be surprised because, it can take you out of it. But the dad strength coming into Toronto, maybe Ty's popping the home run there too. There's potential for this offense to get going. Everyone knows it. Everyone knows on paper what this offense can do. And it's just not happening yet. But that's not even the biggest key for this team right now to really get it going. The biggest problem for the Mariners right now is they're not in games to where the offense can win it for you. That happened in game 1. I think Gilbert kept you in that game. Obviously Miller, they won that game. 7 shutout, of course. But the 3rd game, Emerson Hancock, 8 earned runs in 3 innings is not going to cut it. George Kirby, final start against the Guardians, not going to cut it. Castillo's start against the Guardians where Bieber is dealing. Rest in peace, his elbow. It's just not going to cut it. So, Colton, what is the Mariners' big key to turning around the team's success?
I mean, it's the pitching staff. This team is built on this pitching staff. And when the pitching staff is not performing, it doesn't matter how anemic or how good the offense is, you're going to lose most nights. If the pitching staff is not coming through, if they're giving up 4, 5, 6 runs a night, it doesn't matter how good the offense looks. You're probably going to lose because this team is built around Luis Castillo, George Kirby, and Logan Gilbert. Those 3 specifically. If those 3 are not performing, you're in deep doo-doo, Joe.
Yes.
Doo-doo. And we've seen it lately they haven't been performing. And again, only the 2nd start into the year, so I think they'll be fine. But Luis Castillo has to come out there and shove 3rd time through the rotation now. All right, you got to start figuring it out. It's It's still early, yes, but every game counts, especially when you're playing a team that could be in the wild card hunt with you if you're in the wild card hunt or, something like that. The Brewers, whatever. The only other time you'll see the Brewers is if somehow you both magically make it to the World Series.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, against the Blue Jays, that's a team that you need to go out there and, I mean, the wins count against them this early, especially when you get to the end of the year and all of a sudden, maybe you and the Blue Jays are right there head to head with each other, and whoever has more wins might get the playoff spot and the other one might get kicked out. So the pitching staff, what this team is built on again, is the pitching staff. Go out there and basically show everyone, the baseball world, why you are what the Mariners rely on. Why everyone said this is the best starting rotation in baseball at the beginning of the year. Because they haven't shown it. They most certainly have not shown it yet. I look then to the bullpen. The bullpen's been bad, especially recently. Obviously, the Colin Snyder thing, hopefully he's okay. I would assume he probably gets put on the IL.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, have we heard anything about the injury? Is it just a contusion?
I don't think there's been any specific update. I'll look really quick, but we talked about it on stream today of like what's going to happen. Like a guy will be on the taxi squad in Toronto, whether it's Vargas or Tyson Miller. Like there will be a bullpen guy with the Mariners there to just kind of hopefully weather the storm. I doubt Snyder's going to be pitching because a line drive like that to your leg, that's an ouchie. That's a big boo boo.
A big boo boo.
Big boo boo, and it's doo doo to get a big boo boo like that. All right. So, as far as that's concerned, I mean, is he really giving us the biggest and most important innings? Not necessarily. I would be a lot more concerned if it was someone with a bigger role within the bullpen, not to put out bad energy of like, oh, guy with like lower value got hurt. That's not what I'm trying to say. But like,
not to poo poo on Colin Snyder's boo boo.
But we are just still desperately missing like Matt Brash and Gregory Santos. It's becoming more and more obvious each series that we play of like, okay, our three leverage guys are Munoz, Stanek, Spire. And when Santos and Brash are healthy, you don't even have to think about Spire and Stanek being like leverage guys. Those are just guys in your bullpen that you can go to. And that's what made that bullpen so dominant last year. Like, obviously we don't have Stanek, but Spire was lights out. Topa was lights out. Brash was really great. Seawald in the first half was phenomenal. So it's like there were guys that you could rely on in each part of the bullpen where you're like, okay, we have this matchup. We know what we need to do. We go get them. Now it's like you really have to pick and choose. And Scott, unfortunately for him, has not managed it overly well, I would say. It has been suboptimal in some instances. But Taylor Saucedo had a great 2 2/3 against the Brewers. That was good. I think he could maybe see his role grow if he continues to pitch well, but I don't think you really want to have to move people into higher leverage roles when you got guys that should be established there and they're just not really giving it their best foot forward necessarily.
And to play devil's advocate for Scott, I mean, even when he has, put theoretically the right guy out there like Andres Munoz, it hasn't worked. It hasn't gone right. And I think that going into this Blue Jay series, the good news is, at least in game one, Munoz and Stanek should be available. You're probably going to want to stay away from Sauce. Did Spire pitch in the last game? I don't think so, right?
No.
So Spire and Sauce, or Spire, Stanek, Munoz, all three of those guys should be available in game one versus the Blue Jays. It's more the Austin Vos, the Colin Snyders. That's kind of where you want to see the Mariners bring somebody with them to Toronto. And like you said, it could be a Tyson Miller. It could even be Carlos Vargas. But I'm not exactly sure where you go right now. It really does depend on if you want to put Colin Snyder on the injured list and depending on how bad it is. But then you look at Emerson Hancock. He wasn't great in his last. He was fine in his first start, not great in his last start, obviously, today that we're recording this. Do you consider moving him back down and bringing up somebody else to fill in for Brian Wu? Brian Wu should be back. I still think by the end of the month. I think Wu should be back by the end of the month. So you're talking, what, 2, maybe 3 more starts?
Roughly.
At the most. So would you, Joe, send Hancock back down?
I think if you really need to, this would be this like the time to do it. Players have options, like it's available to you. If you are worried about the bullpen status in terms of the innings that you will have available to you in these 3 games against Toronto, sure, you can option Hancock, maybe bring up Levi Stout, another guy that has options, slate him to start the second game against Chicago back home. And if it worst comes to worse, something happens where a guy has to go long out of your bullpen, say in games 1, 2, or 3 against Toronto, then you use him there, and then you option him, and then you bring up, Jonathan Diaz or Dallas Keuchel to start game 2 against Chicago. It's not pretty, but there's options available. There are rotating arms that can be utilized within the Mariners organization right now to fill in some of these gaps in innings that if they're super worried about it, it's possible. It's not great, but for me, the thing with Hancock is the velo and the stuff just playing down after about 30 pitches. It just doesn't work. It worked okay against the Guardians. He was able to pitch around it. Against the Brewers, they were all over it. Like, he was toast. Do I have faith that he can do that against a Cubs team that I had playing, being better than the Brewers this year? Are they playing better than the Brewers? Not necessarily, but there's potential in that Cubs series for another big blow-up start to happen for Emerson Hancock. Do you want to see that happen, or like are you risking it by bringing up another guy? I don't know. I would probably lean on the edge of sending Hancock down and calling up Levi Stout would be my move for this.
Interesting. I would go the other way. I would leave Hancock in the rotation because who's to say that Levi Stout's going to be especially a guy who was pitching for the Reds, who probably has faced the Cubs already before.
Yeah.
I would leave Hancock in there for a few more starts. I mean, one blow-up start. I look at it as, okay, well, we didn't send George Kirby down when he gave up a,
like the other day. I get where you're going, but the body of work is much different. I think
right.
if I'm being patient, I would give Hancock one more start. If it's bad, then the move happens. But I think with how the bullpen and just innings overall are looking right now, with the bullpen had to throw basically 10 innings in the last 3 games, something like that. Like they're gonna be a little exhausted. Having a guy that can give you 2-3 innings out of the pen, like as a guarantee with like Levi Stout as like a safety net, I think would be big, because Hancock's not going to get used until, like I said, the second game against Chicago on Saturday. Like Hancock's not pitching until then, no matter what. Whereas Levi Stout, I know he pitched 2 days ago. He can probably go for you in the second game against Toronto if you need him to, in long relief, or if it's a blowout game, say the Mariners are winning or losing, either way, but winning, hopefully, you say have George go 6, have Levi Stout finish the last 3. Something like that is kind of maybe where my head's at, of a swingman opportunity for him. Maybe not guaranteed to start the second game, but I understand why you're probably willing to give Hancock a longer leash than I kind of presented.
Well, and I think that the difference is that the reason that Hancock would be sent down is for innings for the bullpen, not because of his performance. And I think that there are 2 different trains of thought on that. Do you trust him against the Cubs more than Levi Stout or Jonathan Diaz or what have you? I think I trust Hancock more than those guys against the Cubs. But, I mean, I could be wrong, but who's to say that any of those guys are going to be any better? Who knows? But for how the bullpen's going to be looking, maybe you do decide to send Hancock down just so you can get another long guy up. Again, if Colin Snyder is going to go on the injured list, maybe you bring a guy up there. Basically what I'm saying is I don't think this move happens until we get closer to that next start. I don't think it happens tomorrow, or I guess today, the day that we're posting this, because I think that you really only need to make one move. And I think that really is Snyder to the injured list, bring up one of Vargas or Miller, and just call it right there. Unless then, of course, we see the bullpen get even more hampered. At which point you probably send down Miller, or you send down Vargas and bring another guy up. So the taxiing of those guys could work better there, in my opinion. But it's tough to say. I mean, Hancock, maybe he's just not that guy, pal. Maybe he's just not that guy.
You thought he was that guy, but he's just not that guy.
He's just not that guy.
Colby was right all along. Look,
don't give Colby credit. All
don't
right.
don't feed the ego. All right, my bad.
Don't feed the ego. His head's already huge.
I don't. That was a little uncalled for.
I got a big head too. When it comes to this Mariners team, there's not just one facet of their game that isn't working right now. And I talked about that in this video on the screen now. Go ahead and check that one out next. We appreciate you guys watching episode 76 of the Hit It Here podcast presented by Bet Online. The once again, Jose Caballero episode of the podcast. And go Mariners.
Can't even think of another guy. What about Robbie Ray times 2?